Have you ever had one of those mornings where you wake up, reach for your phone, scroll for maybe 5 minutes, and suddenly feel this heavy, inexplicable weight in your chest before your feet even touch the floor? It is a remarkably common experience these days, and it feels like we are all carrying around this invisible, collective tax on our minds. We are navigating a world that is not just post-pandemic, but one that is being radically re-engineered by artificial intelligence, while simultaneously being rocked by geopolitical fractures and economic instability. It makes you wonder, is our mental infrastructure actually built to withstand this level of compounding, non-stop stimulation? Or are we witnessing a fundamental mismatch between human biology and the modern world?
That mismatch is precisely the core of the issue. Psychologists and sociologists are increasingly pointing to this concept of the polycrisis, a state where multiple, distinct crises overlap and feed into one another, creating a whole that is far more overwhelming than the sum of its parts. Think about it. We barely had time to process the existential dread of a global pandemic before we were thrust into a landscape of soaring inflation, regional wars broadcasted in real time, and the sudden, disruptive rise of generative AI. Historically, humanity has faced massive disruptions, but they usually occurred with some breathing room in between. Today, the news cycle does not have a reset button, and our brains are constantly treating these distant, systemic threats as immediate physical dangers.
It is like our evolutionary wiring is being hijacked. Our fight or flight response was designed for encounters with localized physical threats, like a predator in the wild. Now, that same physiological system is being triggered by a headline about global supply chains, nuclear posturing, or interest rates halfway across the world. Because we cannot physically fight or run away from a macroeconomic trend, that stress just bottlenecks inside us, turning into chronic, low-grade anxiety. How do you see the economic side of this playing out on a personal level, especially when paired with the narrative of AI replacing human labor?
The economic anxiety of today is uniquely insidious because it strikes at our sense of agency and future-proofing. In the past, the formula was relatively straightforward. You acquire a skill, you work hard, and you secure a level of stability. But now, generative AI has introduced a massive variable of unpredictability. People are not just worried about losing their jobs to a cheaper human competitor. They are worried about their entire field becoming obsolete overnight to an algorithm. When you combine that existential career dread with the very tangible, immediate stress of inflation and housing costs, you get a population that feels perpetually precarious. It is hard to cultivate mental resilience when the ground beneath your feet feels like shifting sand.
And that precarity is amplified by the fact that we no longer have quiet spaces to retreat to. Even when we are alone in our rooms, the outside world is actively invading our minds through our screens. It feels like we are living in a giant global fishbowl, where every crisis is magnified, and we are forced to watch it in high definition, 24 hours a day.
Exactly, and that brings us to the social media aspect of the equation. These platforms are not passive delivery systems for information. They are active feedback loops engineered to capture and monetize our attention. And what captures attention more effectively than anything else? Fear, outrage, and novelty. The algorithms are essentially mapping our anxieties and feeding them back to us in a highly concentrated form. If you are already worried about job security or global conflict, the algorithm notices your lingering gaze on those topics and feeds you 10 more videos or articles validating that exact fear. It creates a personalized echo chamber of doom.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of anxiety. And speaking of trying to make sense of this incredibly complex, fast-moving world, that is actually a perfect transition to what we try to do right here on our show. If you are enjoying this deep dive, you should know that this is exactly what we are about. Our show, The New Sentinel, is entirely dedicated to providing these kinds of in-depth discussions and deep dives into a wide array of topics.
Absolutely. We like to think of ourselves as a guide through the noise. We cover everything from the glitz and glamour of pop culture to the strategic intricacies of military operations and global security. Each episode is thoughtfully crafted to offer you a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter, featuring detailed analysis, expert perspectives, and engaging storytelling.
Whether you are a pop culture enthusiast, trying to understand media trends, or someone with a keen interest in global security and technology, we have something for you. So, if you want to stay informed and entertained in a world that is changing by the second, make sure to tune in, view, subscribe, comment, and post an inquiry. We love hearing from our listeners and building this community of curious minds.
It really is about building a community where we can process these massive shifts together, rather than in isolation. Because isolation is the silent partner of modern anxiety. When we look at the social trends post-pandemic, the physical isolation may have ended, but the psychological isolation seems to have lingered. We replace physical communities with digital ones, but digital connection often lacks the biological feedback of real human presence, the shared eye contact, the tone of voice, the physical proximity that calms our nervous systems.
That is a profound point. We are hyper-connected but deeply lonely. And into this vacuum of loneliness steps AI, not just as a tool, but increasingly as a companion. We are seeing the rise of AI friends, AI therapists, and AI partners. On one hand, it is fascinating and potentially helpful for people who are completely isolated. But on the other hand, does it worry you that we might be outsourcing our most fundamental human need, genuine connection to lines of code?
It is deeply concerning, and it speaks to a broader philosophical shift. If we begin to rely on AI for emotional validation, we are engaging with an entity that is programmed to never disagree with us, to always say the right thing, and to be perfectly compliant. But real human relationships are messy, difficult, and require compromise. That friction is actually where personal growth happens. If we replace that friction with seamless, algorithmic interaction, we might find ourselves becoming less capable of handling real-world relationships, further accelerating our isolation and anxiety. It is a classic case of a technological solution creating a deeper social problem.
It really highlights the legal and regulatory vacuum we are currently operating in. Technology is moving at an exponential rate, while our legal frameworks and social guardrails are moving at a linear, bureaucratic pace. There are virtually no comprehensive protections against the psychological manipulation of advanced algorithms, nor are there clear guidelines on how AI should be integrated into sensitive areas like mental health support. We are essentially running a massive, real-time psychological experiment on the global population without a control group.
And the cost of that experiment is being paid in collective mental health. If you look at it through a broader lens, we are also dealing with a massive loss of trust in institutions. When people feel that their governments, their economic systems, and their technological leaders are unable or unwilling to protect them from these rapid changes, trust collapses. Without trust, anxiety flourishes because there is no sense of a shared safety net. You feel like you are entirely on your own, fighting a losing battle against hyper-intelligent algorithms and macroeconomic forces beyond your control.
So, where does that leave us? If we acknowledge that the geopolitical landscape is tense, the economy is uncertain, social media is addictive, and AI is rewriting the rules of society, how do we protect our sanity? How do we reclaim our mental sovereignty in a world that seems actively designed to fragment our attention and heighten our anxiety?
I think the first step is recognizing that our anxiety is often a completely rational response to an irrational environment. There is a tendency to pathologize our feelings, to say, if you are anxious, there is something wrong with your brain chemistry that needs to be fixed. But sometimes, anxiety is simply your system screaming that the way we are living is unsustainable. Once we accept that, we can move away from self-blame and start focusing on intentional boundaries. We have to learn to curate our digital environments with the same care we curate our physical ones. That means actively choosing when to disconnect, aggressively filtering the information we consume, and prioritizing local, tangible, analog experiences.
It is about shrinking our circle of concern and expanding our circle of influence. We cannot personally solve geopolitical conflicts or stabilize global inflation, but we can control how we interact with our immediate community, our families, and our own minds. There is a quiet power in reclaiming the local and the physical cooking a meal, having a face-to-face conversation, walking in nature, or simply sitting in silence without a screen demanding our attention.
Exactly. It is a form of modern rebellion to be offline, to be quiet, and to be content with the immediate world around you. AI and the digital landscape are here to stay, and they offer incredible potential. But we must remain the masters of these tools, not their subjects. We need to cultivate a deep internal anchor so that when the digital storm rages, we aren't swept away by it. The future will belong to those who can maintain their focus, their empathy, and their mental clarity in an increasingly noisy world.
That feels like the ultimate challenge of our generation. As we wrap up today, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. In your own daily life, what is one digital habit you can step back from today to reclaim a piece of your peace of mind? The world out there is vast and chaotic, but the space between your ears is entirely yours to guard. Thank you for walking through these complex ideas with us today on the New Sentinel. Keep questioning, keep connecting, and we will see you in the next episode.